Wattpad, an examination of a story-sharing platform. Hey everyone, this is Rebecca. I'm currently standing in front of you, wishing I'd left this picture out of the presentation. I'm going to start with a brief history of Wattpad so that we're all on the same page. Wattpad is a story-sharing platform that was created almost 10 years ago today, in November 2006. Wattpad contains user-generated content of literature. This literature is multi-genre and can range anywhere from new works of fiction to poetry to fan fiction, short stories, non-fiction, and really anything that you can write down. Wattpad operates on both a website and an app. Users create profiles with unique usernames that they can share with their friends or those that they meet on the site. While on the site, they can write, edit, and read and critique the works of both themselves and others. We're going to be examining this story-sharing platform through the works of the experts that we have talked about in class. We have 19 of these suckers to get through, so let's get started. Let's start at the beginning. We're going to visit the hype curve that we discussed in the first day of class. Let's talk about 3 major points in story-sharing platforms' hype. First, we're going to talk about the peak of inflated expectations. There was a point where people thought that story-sharing platforms such as Wattpad would undo the book publishing industry as we know it. Users would be able to publish their content free of charge without any of the hassle and distribute it to millions and millions of viewers. Why wasn't this a great thing? Then, if you fall down to the trough of disillusionment, you see that people realized that what was on these platforms wasn't necessarily all amazing work. It didn't all deserve to be published. So, of course, jokes began to circulate how it was nothing more than badly written fan fiction and a bunch of middle schoolers. Then, of course, people began to notice a little bit of what its real use was, and we hit the plateau of productivity, where people realized that maybe it wasn't ever going to undo the publishing industry like they thought it was, but that it provides a creative outlet for those who maybe are not ready to be published, don't have the opportunity to be published, or don't have the desire to be published, to share their works of literature with their fans, with their friends, and with anybody who has any interest in what they're doing. Speaking of curves and trends, let's move on to Mary Meeker's 2016 Internet Trends Report. Meeker established that many of these trends are affected by external factors outside of the website, platform, or technology's control. Things such as the economy, other websites and platforms or technologies, or things such as government and politics. There has been a slow decline in the use of story-sharing platforms over the years. Some of this can be explained by the hype curve, but Mary Meeker might also offer some other explanations. If I had to take a guess as to what her response on these trends would be, I would say that it probably has something to do with the popularity and growth of other social media platforms. There isn't necessarily a need for a specialized outlet for story sharing when you can use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, or many other things to artistically express your work. Usership may be down, but people are still using these websites, which of course is good for Wattpad's advertising platform. Now we're going to talk about the ambient workforce of Wattpad. This term may seem a little unnatural. Of course, we know that ambient workforces are people who are paid small amounts of money to do menial tasks in order to keep a larger website like Amazon or Google up and running. When you think of Wattpad, you know, of course, that they're not actually being paid for their work, but it is the users contributing their creative ideas to this platform that allows Wattpad to function as a business. And it is, in fact, a business. So one of the book reports that we talked about later in the semester mentioned that the author thought that those people who contributed to the internet should be paid. I don't necessarily agree with that, but this idea does seem to be what helps keep story-sharing platforms in business. It is users like you and me and everybody else using these services and putting out their own creative work that allows Wattpad to turn a profit. As everybody's favorite Blue Tang would say, just keep typing, typing, typing. One of Wattpad's most popular content genres is fan fiction. We talked a little about fan fiction and the One Direction fandom earlier in the semester. As we discussed, some of the fan fiction can get a little R-rated, but some of it is still pretty tame and PG. Wattpad has addressed this issue by creating a secondary website called Wattpad After Dark, where users can post things that are only for the 18-plus audience. When we had Lilyn in from Google, she said that one of her favorite things she gets to do as a Googler is advocate for social justice movements. She talked about the symposiums that she had set up after the unfortunate Charleston shootings. During one of our Pew discussions, we talked about the trend of hashtags for Black Lives Matter to raise awareness of social justice issues. Social justice does not just have a home at Google and on Twitter. It also has a home on story sharing sites like Wattpad. Authors will sometimes create works that reflect current culture and social justice problems, and they will write them in a way that addresses issues and starts conversations. It's not all just silly fan fiction. Sherry Turkle would probably say that this is just one more reason why we are all stuck in our phones and pulled out of real conversations. However, she talked about our need to once again regain the ability to sit alone with our thoughts and to learn and to grow intellectually. And it seems likely that she would vouch for reading and writing to be some of those activities that we could use to develop ourselves intellectually and learn about ourselves so that we could once again step out into conversation and engage with our peers. So, although it is unlikely that she would approve of the social aspect of Wattpad, it seems that she would probably approve of the activity that those users are engaging in when they are reading and writing for the site. Why do these authors choose to post their content on Wattpad instead of on their own blogs like Maria Popova did with Brain Pickings? I think there are a couple of issues at play here. First, maintaining a blog is very hard. These authors choose to give up the maintenance of the blog and the advertising and the subsequent income for the convenience of not having to deal with the website platform, having to maintain a high usership, a high reading. They're also guaranteed that their content is going to be placed in front of a very large audience who are looking for the kind of content that they are producing. It takes a lot of the stress and the skill out of it. There's also could be another issue. A majority of Wattpad's users are female, and as we talked with the entrepreneurial panel, there tends to be a little bit of some hesitation with many females in creating their own businesses. And if you're going to create a successful blog that allows you to work on it full time, it is in fact a business. It may be a one-man business like Popova's Brain Pickings, but it is a business nonetheless. Females tend to be a little more timid when approaching that topic. Some of the content produced on the site allows the authors to gain a following, and this brings into light the conflict between privacy and publicity that we talked about earlier in the semester. Now, Wattpad does offer a little bit of anonymity by using usernames, but because they're still producing very real content and the comment sections are open and you can also chat back and forth by using the usernames, it is obvious that they still have a bit of publicity. And of course, as we know with most social media, just because you're anonymous by using the username does not mean it cannot be traced back to you at some other point. This brings up the notion of persona that Kerry Washington talked about putting on our public face. Who are these authors being when they're producing content online? It is quite possible and very likely that they are grooming content for their readers. Perhaps they developed a following for being known as a fan fiction writer for a certain fandom, so they continue to produce that content because it's what continues to give them their comments, their likes, their shares, their fame. Privacy and anonymity on the internet are becoming more and more of an issue. When Zeynep came and talked to us about the uses of metadata in the process of job hiring and job hunting, it became very prevalent. Can you imagine in a world where content that you posted on sites like Wattpad could possibly be considered in the job hiring process? What if you went out into the world and some computer was able to discriminate against people who'd posted fan fiction versus those who'd posted other content? Or whether they said that only people who had posted would get jobs or who hadn't posted. Of course, this content being tied back to you and related to you can become very important. And the more computers and the internet become a prominent part of our lives, the more important this will be. Of course, Snowden would tell you that this information is already being gathered, not just by potential employers, but by the government. The fear is that this kind of gathering of all of the information on the internet about a person, including their creative works and social media accounts, will create a kind of censorship. And they're afraid that censoring creativity is not going to be good. Of course, it's unlikely that anything you publish on Wattpad will have detriment to your future status as an American citizen, but it is possible that something written could come back to haunt you in later years. One of the things that Wattpad does to offer a little more security is that it uses an HTTPS, which helps hide your identity just a little bit when you're making secure transactions. Now, it doesn't make much difference whether or not you're using good old Google Chrome or whether or not you're using Tor. It's not really that kind of sensitive information. But if you were a little worried, you could always switch to a more secure browser. Speaking of government, let's take a quick transition over to the concepts of Code for America. Wattpad does not use open source coding, so it does not follow the structure that was talked about. So essentially what this means is that the government could not use the coding in Wattpad to create a better website. Wattpad is incredibly user-friendly, but it has no real benefits outside of the site itself. Of course, stifling creativity also means the stifling of memes. Now, Wattpad is full of memes in the traditional sense of the photos. They're posted in comments, they're used as cover art for different books, people use them on their profiles, they're designed to laugh, share, express, and communicate together. Now, if you go back to the definition of meme that we talked about in class, which is just the repetition of some cultural phenomenon into another package that can be shared, then technically a lot of the work written on Wattpad is also a meme. Particularly the fan fiction. If you think about Harry Potter, for example, if you retake Harry Potter as the cultural phenomenon and you write a fan fiction that is likable and shareable and relatable to Harry Potter, but still distinct and different in its own way, you have created a meme. Of course, where there are memes and comments, there are also going to be trolls and... Let's jump ahead and talk about effective computing. Can you imagine a Wattpad with effective computing? Imagine all of the possibilities and ramifications of being able to understand the emotional state of the people who are reading your content online. The site could generate content or recommendations based on your mood, or perhaps it could provide feedback to the authors about what people are feeling while they were reading it so that they could improve their content. Or maybe even a possibility where there were multiple endings or outcomes to a particular story, and the one that you read was based on your current mood and what the computer thought you would most appreciate at that time. Isn't it crazy to think the way social media could change if it could only understand something that we think of as so simple, which is the human emotion? This concludes our examination of Wattpad. Thanks for listening.